Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. On this episode, we have Grady Congleton, who, when we did this interview, had started and was running Youth Sports Reimagined. He has now evolved that into 4D sports medicine. So as we're talking about Youth Sports Reimagined in this episode, just keep in mind that the name has changed, but the goal has not. So everything we talk about is still true, just going at it from a little bit different approach. So really interesting insight from Grady. He works with middle schoolers, and also just has had some unique experiences on his own that allow him to really go in deep to this conversation and the education that he's trying to provide to parents and coaches to help improve youth sports, not just from the athletic training side, but just overall in general. We are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. It is now August as of this release. They've got some new equipment out with the recovery tools and a new ankle brace that is one of a kind, to say the least. So please check them out if you're looking to get any of those things, and also their recovery tubs, which are completely portable, super convenient, and obviously a necessity at this time of the year. But without further ado, please enjoy the episode. Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Grady Congleton, who is an athletic trainer and has also started Youth Sports Reimagined, which we kind of came across on social media, started checking out what's been done so far with it. And it's a really interesting concept. And, the more you were reading about it, plus some of the things you probably see on social media, is something that probably needs to occur. We were just talking offline. We both have 2-year-olds. I don't know about him, but I'm slightly nervous about it, what sports are going to look like for my kid, and have been trying to make pacts with myself to not be that parent and do some of those things as they get older. But before we jump into everything Youth Sports Reimagined, I just wanted to turn it over to you, Grady, to kind of fill in your background on where you've come from as an athletic trainer and how we got to this point, and then we'll get more into the details.
All right, well, thanks, Joe. I am an athletic trainer at Eagle Bluff School in Deerfield, Massachusetts. It's a private middle school, grade 6 to 9. And I worked in the middle secondary school for more than a decade. And I graduated from the University of Vermont as an undergraduate in athletic training. And also obtained my master's degree at Smith College in exercise and sports studies. So in the master's program, my research interest was centered around long-term athlete development, and this kind of sparked my interest in improving youth sports in some way. There's so many different institutions out there that do a great job in trying to look at youth sports, but how can athletic trainers be part of the process? So that's what I'm looking at.
Awesome. So just kind of broad to start off with, how did Youth Sports Reimagined kind of get started? What brought it to fruition? You referenced, obviously, you did some research around, long-term sport development and youth development. So if you wouldn't mind filling us in.
Yeah, so Youth Sports Reimagined is kind of an idea that's been going on for a while. But one of the things that since the pandemic, looking at the research, I'm looking at youth sports participation. It's gone down since the pandemic started. So, and we're looking at increase in news media stories about umpires getting punched in the face, about unruly parents, and all those different things that you see in the news. So it made me really concerned. Like you said, about our 2-year-old, what kind of system are they going to grow up in? And I'm hoping that maybe I can make a little bit of a dent in just raising awareness about the value of long-term athlete development. So it's really a combination of a lot of different things have come together to create this idea. And this idea is still evolving. I'm still looking for contributors, different perspectives, and things like that.
Fantastic. Um, One of the comments you kind of made in just looking at the notes that we had for this, the living vicariously through our children, and some of the things that happened there. I growing up don't believe in any kind of hindsight that I experienced that. I had interest in things and my parents supported that as much as they could. When we started having conversations about traveling an hour and a half each way for practice for certain things, we discussed very openly if that was something that was worth the time and the investment from everybody. Um, but that's also one that, having been an athletic trainer more in the collegiate side, but still listening to plenty of parents, yelling down at coaches and officials, like trying really hard to make sure I'm not that way. What have you seen with that, and like how that impacts obviously just youth sports in general, but then the youth, the actual youth, whose parents might display some of those um,
Yeah.
activities.
Yeah, I say living vicariously, yeah, I think as our trainers, we're at the forefront. We witness a lot of different things, but we don't necessarily speak up on it. So that's basically what I'm trying to do is try to raise awareness. So one of the things I've seen about living vicariously through your kid is that, for example, on social media, you see terms like soccer dads or soccer moms or baseball dads or fill in a blank mom or dad, right?
Mhm.
So when is it about the kids, right? So they have this. I don't know. I'd be interested to know more. I'm hoping I can talk to more parents, talk to more people, kind of get the perspective, from a point of view that like I want to hear what they're thinking about. So um, how why are they living vicarious? Is it because they have insecurities that maybe they weren't good athletes, but they want the kids to be good athletes? There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But my concern is when is it too much the focus on the adults rather than the kids? So the culture really should be, hey, Johnny, can we get your input in this? What do you think about this? What are your interests? Do you rather play for your local team as opposed to traveling, an hour away to practice? And that's taking time out of other things, other interests. So,
Mhm.
and children need multiple interests. They need to be able to explore the world if they're going to be productive adults.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kind of switching to long-term development model. I will plead some of my naivete on this. Like I've looked into some different things. I know a lot of the different from the strength and conditioning side. The associations have put out some different things, and there's a lot of good work out there in that regard. For me, having again working in the university setting, our long-term model was a 4 to 5 year model of how do
Mhm.
we help someone from when they show up as a freshman till 6 years for some of them, especially with COVID year mixed in there, but really get the most out of them of that. What if you could start with kind of a definition of long-term development from your perspective and looking at it from the youth, and then any other kind of details, and maybe we'll have a few more offshoot questions from that.
Yeah, it's a great question. A long-term athlete development model, or is sometimes abbreviated to LTAD or LTAD. If you want to make up a short term for it. So long-term athlete development model is really a system where it's broken down by ability and age. So, and it defines what a athlete should be doing within that time frame. So it's really a kind of a guardrail to prevent early sports specialization and overuse injuries. and burnout. So 70% of kids in youth sports quit by the time they turn 13. And one of the reasons why they're quitting is because they're not having fun anymore. They're burning out or they're getting injured, right? So 13 is where we see a lot of musculoskeletal changes, a lot of, changes due to puberty and growth in adolescence. So we see a lot more injuries happening in the body, as we know, the tendons and the muscle are not as strong as they should be during that time of excessive growth. So they're at higher risk of injury. So the model is just to really educate parents, coaches, athletic trainers, or anybody on kind of like a guardrail to prevent an athlete, say a 10, from specializing in baseball for nine months out of the year.
With that, again, you've dove into this way more than I have. So if this is an obvious question, I'm sorry. Have you found things out there, or has there been things developed that are almost kind of sports specific in terms, which I know is kind of a four-letter word, sports specific. That's something we like to see athletes, especially young athletes, do a lot of different things, some of those different stresses. Or is it just more general guidelines when it comes to youth athletes, especially as you reference those like early double-digit years or those teen years?
Yeah, so I think the sport specific can be part of the long term athlete development model. So if they have a strong interest in one sport,
Sure.
then you can develop a plan around that sport. But you also need to encourage taking part in other sports to help that cross training, the motor development, and playing different sports are shown to improve, those things. So the model is the nice thing about the model is that it can be individualized. So if you're working with a youth athlete, which I do here at Eagle Book,
Hmm.
I work with 11-year-olds, and they want to start weight training, they want to start strength training, they want to start doing these things. So I can say, I can tell them and their parents that, like, listen, play 3 sports here. Well, they're required to anyway. And then here's how you start in the weight room and creating a plan so that they can kind of discover their strengths. If their strength is in baseball, then we can focus on baseball specific activities during the off season. But when in the fall and the winter, they need to play other sports to help them develop as a whole athlete.
So, in your experience with that in your work in the middle school, and like you referenced some other places, how have you best been able to, for lack of a better description, sell people on that? Because there is so much, quick. What's going to happen quick?
Yeah.
What's going to be the thing that sets me there? And again, we referenced. I've dealt with this in the collegiate level where we found it was Division 3, so we're not talking the elite of the elite, but still really good athletes.
Hmm.
Anybody in college is some version of a pretty good athlete. The basics were so much more impactful. Like instead of the bands and the chains and all of the fancy tech equipment, yes, overly super helpful, but not necessarily required.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a hard sell for sure. Social media and the dopamine hit is real. We want stuff now, right? So, but if we can sell a parent, say, listen, if you have 11-year-old, 12-year-old, have them start the good habits now, and as we know, like I asked them, when was the last time you were able to get rid of a bad habit? Like it's hard. It's hard to get rid of a habit.
Hmm.
So why not start with your kid and have them start the good habits and avoid the bad ones now, and maybe they'll be a little bit more successful as a person, as an athlete. Um, and that's basically how I try to sell it.
Gotcha. And this question kind of tails off of that. Um, Best ways to engage people in education. I've was just listening to something on the way in that kind of ties into this, but then you referenced social media, which sometimes just seems like if you can yell louder through 240 characters is like the route people go.
Mhm.
But then there was a discussion I was listening to on, if you ask somebody why they believe something, that's a lot easier question for people to answer than if you tell them, well, what is it that you actually believe in about this thing? And people struggle with that because they think they have this like intrinsic knowledge about it, but when they're actually asked the question, they may not be as well educated on it as they thought. And I know I catch myself being guilty of that all the time. So, what have you found the best way to engage people to have those conversations and that education? You have a background in that knowledge and expertise, but everybody's a Google search away from finding something that's probably contradictory.
Yeah, yeah. I think our brain naturally want to go the easiest route. So we want to, our brains can't handle everything. So we want to take the easiest explanation and go with it, right? Um, but it's, when I educate people, I try to keep in mind that you have to be kind and gentle with that person, right? So, I teach two classes here. So I teach anatomy and health to the eighth graders here. So and teaching kids are a lot easier than teaching adults because kids have a much, as you know, like a more malleable mind. It can shape,
Sure.
their minds should be easily changed. But for adults, they have a protective barrier, in my experience, where if you present them upfront with something that's contradictory, they're going to shut down with a defense mechanism. They're protecting the intellectual world. So what I try to do is try to go in the back door essentially and say, listen, I have an idea. This might be really beneficial. Let me know if you want to talk, or you know, presenting in a way that doesn't completely shut a person down. So I think we need to, as educators, I think a lot of athletic trainers are educators too. Um, we need to be mindful of the psychological trauma or barriers that people have around knowledge. So we need to be able to be mindful of
I like that.
that.
Kind of doing a little bit of a shift. But we just in looking through everything, that you have on your Substack, breaking down youth sports culture that is toxic. Uh, Reference, and I'm curious about it. At the school you work at, they're required to play three sports.
Hmm.
Everyone.
Hmm.
Is that something that was already implemented, or did you have a hand in kind of?
No, it's already implemented. We've been doing that for as long as anybody here can remember. And it's, yeah, go ahead.
No, no.
Yeah, yeah.
Please.
It's tying the belief that we are a middle school where we believe in that everybody should try different things,
Okay.
and certainly we do have people who hate sports,
Sure.
and we offer activities that are kind of like sports but not competitive, right? We have like ultimate ditch, which we offer non-competitive ultimate ditch. We even have a recreational pickleball team.
Sure.
It's just a lot of fun. So we offer different things, but we believe that at the age 11 to 15 years old, sometimes 16, we people need to branch out. They need to try different things. So and requiring them to play three sports is part of that mission.
I like how there's the flexibility within that. I was
Mm,
curious as to how that
yeah.
goes because forcing somebody to run track and field when they don't want to
Right.
run could probably have some disastrous results. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic that there's a lot of options. But kind of coming back to that, what have you seen as any best practices or useful things? If people are, especially athletic trainers, but parents, as we kind of talked about, well, eventually you and I will get into that, I'm sure. But if you're around a toxic youth sport culture, what can you do to kind of help crack that, or maybe start shifting the culture?
I think talking to parents and getting to know them, and one of the great things about working here is that you really do get to know the parents because the middle school kids, right, they're not mature enough to make their own decisions. So you do have to work with parents on a lot of different things. And there's a lot of behavioral um, stuff that does come up. There are the hormones of aging and whatnot. So you can imagine like, a bunch of eighth graders running around. Um, so we work with parents a lot and we kind of, we push the idea on that. Okay, what's your perspective on youth sports? Why do you send your kid to Eagle Brook? And it's a private school, so the parents have a choice to
Hmm.
send their children here. Um, and I've worked at public schools before, and in public schools, you don't really have much choice. Sometimes you can get away with sending your kids to another school or another town, but one of the great things about working here is that I get to talk to parents who come from the travel you know, sports background. And they said, I couldn't do an hour each way. It wasn't feasible for our family. And, he was missing out on social opportunities, missing out on other interests and whatnot. So they send the kid here. So like I have one student who not only is a top-notch hockey player and a top-notch lacrosse player, he's also a cellist in the orchestra. He's also in student council on different things. So this is the opportunity kids should be getting, and I want to translate that and inspire other people to start thinking in that avenue. Like, how can we get kids to play sports, but also have time for the other interests and not having to burn out by the time they're 13.
Absolutely. We've talked about ATs being in a unique position to help kind of educate, and especially in your role in the middle school and any secondary school athletic trainer. Not that they need one more thing added to their plate, because they are some
Mhm.
of the most overworked people in the profession. Um, but that being said, if you could elaborate on some more of the uniqueness of the AT position, you talked about getting in touch with parents, but just anything else that you wanted to kind of share on the impact ATs can have on kind of maybe helping shift this trend. Because at some point, I feel like it's one of those, it's just going to go so far that it has to revert back, and it could be have some really ugly repercussions if it goes too far.
Yeah, we don't want the pendulum to swing too far each way.
Sure.
It's like, politics. I think sometimes we go from one end to the other
Yep.
end so quickly, can't keep up. So, but I think one of the things ETs and secondary school level. So before I come to Eagle Brook, I worked at a secondary school in Maine, and so I have a unique perspective on grade 6 to 12. So we are pretty overworked for sure, but I think while a lot of us take pride in working in secondary school, not including middle school athletic trainers in that category as well, is that we get to really know the kids, and we also get to know the kids who might not be athletes.
Sure.
And I worked at Smith College for 2 years, it was college, Division 3 women's college, and everybody there is there to play sports, right? So you don't need to change their minds about um, playing sports. But for a ninth grader coming in, you can have an impact on that person to be inspired to play a sport, to be active. And they may not play college ball, and that's okay. We're in that mindset that
Hmm.
it's okay if you don't play college ball, but you need to be active for life so that way you can get the benefits of exercise. Um, and we know, and that's the public health role that we can have as a profession.
I like it. Just to kind of summarize on the U Sports Reimagined, and we'll link to everything. who is that most intended for? What is your target, or what are you hoping people will most take away from the work you're doing with that?
I want them to be aware of the different tentacles that have wrapped around youth sports. So you have toxic parents, toxic coaches, and then you have athletic trainers who can be involved. We can have a platform where we can talk about these issues, but also still provide education on, the stuff that we are experts at. The injury prevention. The next post I'm writing about is concussions. I'm sharing my story about different students that I've been talking to recently and asked them, can I share your story about, concussion, and making it relatable so that, it's for, athletes, parents, coaches, athletic trainers, um, strength and conditioning coaching, really anybody involved in the sports world to not just digest, here are the symptoms of concussion, right? I think a lot of people are already familiar with that, thanks to the huge public health campaign that
Sure. Yep.
various organizations have undertaken. Um, but I want to tell a story. Like, the preview of this post is a student got concussion initially, and then 2 weeks later, gets hit again, gets another concussion. So he has two concussion in 2 weeks. And in that time frame, it was vacation, right? I did not see the student.
Hmm.
Saw the doctor. The doctor cleared him, so that he kind of fell through the cracks a little bit. So I want to tell a story. I'm like, this is what happened. Here are what the consequences were, and you know, this is why we should adolescents should pay attention to it.
For sure. Anything else we haven't covered yet that you want to cover around youth sports reimagined, or just kind of this general broad topic?
Yeah, so other things I want to say about Youth Sports Reimagined, I chose that name, just kind of a general name
Hmm.
that, but I don't want to be in a way that, um, this is on parents or this is on coaches. I want to
Sure.
be a productive environment where anybody's welcome to comment or leave feedback and say, "Here's what I think," and I am a really firm believer in the saying that have a strong opinion, but hold it weakly, right? So you have a strong opinion about something, but if you're presented with evidence or information that contradicts that opinion, it's okay to change it, right? So we constantly have to reimagine our jobs, our system, our society. Even though we might not like to, um, I want to make it okay to do that.
That's awesome. I really like the thought process that went into that, into the name and how you're approaching it. I think that's great. So well done in that regard.
Thank you.
Uh, from there, ready to hop into the AT chat questions?
Hmm.
First one is, where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years, since you could kind of set the example?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball like um
Oh, if you did, I'm sure you'd be spending your time on a beach somewhere retired, because you have it all figured out.
that's right. But I'm on the, just a plug here, I'm on the executive board for the athletic trainers of Massachusetts.
Okay.
So our state organization.
Yep.
And one of our biggest initiatives is to engage with legislators to change our practice act in Massachusetts.
Yes.
And our practice act, I don't know about Wisconsin, right? So I don't know
Yep.
what it's like in other states, but I saw recently that Illinois just updated the practice act,
Yep.
and that's what we're trying to do here. We have a practice act that's from 1980s ish, right? And it says, and we're violating the practice act, every day. We say you only can work with athletes, and we do that for the most part, but it's so restrictive that it doesn't meet the modern demand for athletic trainers.
Right.
It's needed in the workplace. It's needed in industrial settings. It's needed in clinics, and doctors want athletic trainers in their offices, right? So we're trying to update it to reflect the current practice of athletic training, and we're looking at it from an economic point of view. Where,
Yep.
like, listen, you know, lawmakers, you're most concerned about economic issues, right? So here's the data. Here's what we can provide to the economy, Massachusetts and beyond. Um, so this is why we need to update and practice that. And the other piece of it, to kind of a long-winded answer here, but the other piece too, we have to improve our relationship with physical therapists. And they've blocked our efforts for so many years.
Yeah.
And it's based in misunderstanding of what we do, right?
Sure.
So, if you talk to the members of the PT profession, they are very supportive of athletic trainers. They hire us in their businesses and practices, which is awesome. But we need to educate those in leadership positions to work with us. And we've made tremendous progress on that front. And I see us doing that, even though I think a lot of people are skeptical of that. And, that's a natural feeling to have, but I think we can make great progress in kind of creating partnership and friendship with other professions.
Yeah, we're in the middle of some of that as well. We kind of had a three-step thing we're trying to do in Wisconsin. We had to have physician signature on our kind of protocols, if you will. We got that removed, and now we're trying to put some parity language around insurance and everything in our practice act, which will be its own unique battle. But then ultimately, I think when ours was originally written, they did a good job keeping it a very broad scope of who we could treat, but the
Mhm.
word vigorous is still in there, and that's where a lot of hang up comes with who we can see and who we can't see from our license perspective. So yes, we're in those same discussions that you guys are working through as well.
Yeah, and I worked in different states. I've worked in Maine. I went to college in Vermont. And I've worked in New York State, and now I'm in Massachusetts. And I do per diem work in Connecticut as well. And their practice act in Connecticut says athletic training from our state can practice in Connecticut for 30 days per calendar year. Which I
Hmm.
thought was pretty cool. But the best one I've encountered so far is Maine, where it's direct access. It says literally anybody who's physically active can consult with an athletic trainer for their
Yep.
needs. And then, but it says, like, if it doesn't get better after 14 to 21 days, then it needs to be referred to a physician, which I thought is pretty broad, pretty
Sure.
flexible. And that's where I like to see the athletic training profession to kind of, we should be able to treat any physically active individual. And those people know the value of athletic trainers, but we're we're not, you know, we're not trying to take PT binges away. We're not
Right.
trying to do all these things. We're in fact we should be showing our economic value. Say, listen, I can treat this person, save you time, save you money, because it's expensive to bring in a patient to your practice.
Hmm.
Um, Save you time, save you money. But if the person really needs it, we know who to refer that person to, right? So for that type of people, I think, and we need to show that.
Yeah, I think there's a misperception of scarcity, which I'm sure is very like specific to each location and where people are at, and obviously, but I feel like in most instances there's more than enough patients to go around. I know we've run into that a little bit in the health system I'm in. PT is booking out 3 weeks, but there's a huge hesitation about letting ATs, even in the short term, just to help expedite some things, which is going to be better for the patient to see
Mhm.
patients. So we're working through some of that. Of we're literally not going to steal anybody from you. We're just going to make everybody seemingly a little bit happier, which I believe should be the ultimate goal. But
Right. And when you talk about, I like to talk about economics. My favorite podcast is a podcast called Freakonomics.
Yeah.
Um, it's really popular,
Yep.
and it talks about economics is everywhere, and
Right.
that's kind of started applying that to the athletic training
For
profession.
sure.
And I really like that frame of mind where like we need to find the numbers to prove ourselves.
Yep.
And if we can show that, like, listen, um, if you increase supply of healthcare professionals, PT, ATs, whatnot, then you increase demand for it. I know it kind of runs counter to increase supply,
Right.
reduce demand. Um, but I think in healthcare, it's different because, you know, everybody needs some sort of intervention,
Yep.
right? So I have, I have a, FAI in my hip right now. I've been delaying surgery for years, but eventually I'm going to need surgery, right? So eventually I'm going to need ET, PTs, doctors to help me out. So we all will need services at some point. So, but I feel like healthcare is too restrictive today, and we're not providing enough opportunity for patients to engage with healthcare services.
For sure. I completely agree. What advice would you go back and give yourself as a young athletic trainer? And if you could kind of set when that would have been in your career?
I think we haven't talked about this yet, but if the your audience doesn't know yet, I'm deaf in both ears. I wear cochlear implant, I'm wearing my headphones here so I can hear better. Um, so one of the things I wish I'd done when I was younger was advocate for myself. I've tried to fit into the athletic training world. I want to be part of the Division 1 University of Vermont experience that did not self advocacy or support was a very private thing. So one of the things I wish I should have done was build relationships through my deafness, and embrace that. And people in since publishing that article about being a deaf athletic trainer, I got more than 1,000 views on it. There's so many comments like,
That's
"Wow, I didn't
awesome.
know this. Could you come and speak to my group, my practice, whatever, and just talk about how to treat deaf athletes or athletes disabled or semi-disabled,
For sure.
or what have you, the language, whatever language you use, um, try to gain awareness around different things. I also think that if we can share each of our stories, that why we became athletic trainers, the challenges that we face, maybe is a major injury or a life event or what have you. You can start to appreciate why people do what they do.
Absolutely. What has been the most influential resource you have found so far in your career?
So at University of Vermont, my sophomore year, I was assigned to a high school in the Burlington, Vermont area, and there was an athletic trainer there who'd been there for years, and she's you know I can her name's Denise Alosa, and she's really big, and I think she's like semi-retired now, but she was really big on the NADA secondary school committee, and she really taught me how to advocate for the profession. And she was the one that, if didn't have anybody to go to conferences with, maybe I was traveling along with none of my colleagues or friends were going, she would be the one to just hang out and go to all the different events. So it's just a person who never really thought about herself, but helping other people. And that's the type of athletic trainer I want to be. So she played a huge part in my career.
Awesome. As a AT in your role, how do you take care of yourself?
That is the magic question, right? So
Right.
everybody wants to know, like, what's the secret sauce
I
to
can't
work
remember
life
who
balance?
suggested it that we add that, but I was like, that is fantastic. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a question I'm glad we added.
Yeah, and I think everybody's unique. You need to find your passion, and really writing the Substack
Okay.
is what it's actually what. Even though it's still athletic training, you still have to think about the athletic training. The writing piece is something I love to do, and I'm a big book guy. I like to read books, and I'm a big fan of Adam Grant Think Again book or
Oh,
Atomic
so good.
Habits. And Atomic Habits.
Haven't read
Um,
it, but need
yeah,
to.
yeah. So I definitely, if you haven't read those books, definitely read those. It gives you different perspectives. Um, and also the other thing is I try not. I'm still working on it, but try not to reinvent the wheel too. If you're at the end of the day, everybody's gone home. You have a pile of notes that you need to, type up. And you find a way to shorten that process down. So maybe what I do, there's all these, the speech to text
Yep.
things doesn't really work for me because my speech isn't quite there to, for the software to recognize it, which is
Sure.
frustrating and difficult for sure. But what I do is I just simply write down all the key components on a post-it note, keep it on my desk, maybe cover it so no one sees it, and then come back to it next morning. I try not to finish it. Like sometimes I feel like I need to finish it, otherwise
Yep.
I'm never gonna be able to get to it. But I've created a system where I can jog my memory the next morning, finish the notes when I have my cup of coffee, when I'm relaxed and refreshed,
Yep.
um, and I can enjoy my evening rather than stay. I used to stay in the office till 7 p.m. before going home, or
Sure.
8 p.m. before going home, and it really helped my work-life balance and my time with my family.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know that one because if I was coming home at 6:30 or 7 each night, I wouldn't be seeing the little one because that's bedtime. So if you could change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a common practice, a mindset, or whatever of your choosing in the field of athletic training, what would it be?
I think, in terms of, we talked about economics, right? And my interest in it, you just stop taking low paying job. And I think as a profession, we need to start educating ourselves. And I'm still educating myself on the power of negotiation
Yes.
and thinking about, okay, negotiation isn't who wins or who loses, right? And the employer is going to have a lot of power to begin with anyway. So we need to start fighting that power and start thinking about, okay, what does the organization need? And negotiations a way to educate them. Okay, this is our value. I can pull up data from this year in my school, or my previous school, and say, listen, this is the value of the work I provide. I'm not looking for. I know you don't have the budget for $100,000, right? Which is the value that I provide here. But can you at least provide, a decent salary,
Right.
right? So and I think a lot of times it's going to be hard. I think it's going to be It's a painful point because sometimes we feel like we have to take a job because being an athletic trainer, a lot of us taking up debt, including myself. Um, taking up a lot of time and resources to become athletic trainers. So I think we have this tendency to feel like we have to take a job immediately,
Yep.
right? To validate our own sense of worth. But if we can change the culture, like it's okay if you don't find a job right away,
Hmm.
right? You can fill in the blank. There's so many different things you can do. Obviously, I'm not speaking for anybody specific. Everybody's got their unique challenges and whatnot, and they need to make their own decisions on this. But I think as a profession, we need to stop taking low-paying jobs and help our employers understand our value.
Absolutely. Last question. What does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
So being an athletic trainer is something that I see in the secondary school level as someone being a trusted adult. I think you get this everywhere you go, but um, I've created I want to create a culture in the athletic training facility where it's not just a clinical space like the doctor's office or PT office, but a space where students walking by can pop in and say hello.
Mm-hmm.
My last school, I had a coffee machine. I had an 18, 19-year-old senior just come in every day, grab a cup of coffee, say hi, have a little chat. And, maybe during that time, I'd be talking about nutrition or sleep or mental health challenges. Um, and then he'll go to practice feeling a little bit better. So we're not just hands-on people, also the counselors sometimes. We know our scope. We know that like we shouldn't be treating the mental
Sure.
health problem.
Yep.
I refer plenty of students to counselors and therapists, but they they can be the first point of contact, and we do have the empathy and and limited training to be able to talk with these students and be their trusted adult. So that's what being an athletic trainer means to me, because a lot of times they're in the training room at the lowest point of their athletic career. So
Right.
that is, that is a really powerful way to make a trusted adult connection.
Fantastic. In closing, anything else you wanted to share?
So I wrote in my notes that I
Yep.
mentioned Adam Grant. So I'm a big fan of Think Again. And I encourage athletic trainers to read this, or anybody who's listening to this. And what Adam Grant argues is that we should be okay with being wrong. So like I mentioned, you can have a strong opinion, but hold it weakly.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at scientists, right, if he has a pyramid, right, of different names. The top is scientists, I forget what the middle one, and the bottom are like politicians or preachers, right?
Yep.
People in the bottom, they firmly hold onto the beliefs and they don't want to change it because they're afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of their worldview being shattered, right? And when the top scientists are people who engage with people who disagree with them, who engage with ideas that might disagree with their own ideas. And as athletic trainers, I think we can benefit greatly from these ideas. The idea of like it's okay to change, it's okay to be wrong. Like ice, for example, like we were icing everybody 10 years ago, but
Sure.
now half of us are saying, maybe we shouldn't ice anymore.
Sure.
Or there's another example. We I forget what the other example was, but ice was a big thing. Yeah.
Fair enough. Just as we wrap up, and we'll link all of this in the show notes so people can take a look at it. If people wanted to follow you or connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
So right now I have social media accounts everywhere, and probably not the best practice. But just check out my Instagram account. If you type in "use Sports Reimagined," my account should pop up.
Yep.
And that same thing. I'm trying out TikTok a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of TikTok right now. But you can check us out there. You can also subscribe to my newsletter. If you type in my name, Grady, etc.substack.com. That's my newsletter. You can subscribe to it. I only post like once a week. So you're not flooded with emails.
For sure.
And I think if you provide feedback, you leave a comment. I would love to hear from different athletic trainers. And if you have an idea that you're so eager, maybe inspired by our conversation to write about something that you're really interested in, maybe you're an expert in it, I will welcome co-authors to come and write different articles. And Substack, the unique feature where I can actually include people as a co-author on certain
Awesome.
articles. So I'm willing to do all that. Just let me know.
Sounds great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to share about U Sports Reimagined and for the work you've already done and have planned to do in the future. So I really appreciate you taking that time and look forward to following what you're doing in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We truly appreciate you guys taking the time to hear from different athletic trainers across the country and what they're doing and the impact they're having. As always, we had mentioned we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. We are still partnering with them on our Throw a Lifeline program. This is a program to get some basic emergency supplies to athletic trainers for whatever reason don't have the resources or the support to get those. It is a crowd-funded effort, so you're helped out by just listening to the ad at the beginning of the episode. And also, if you would like to, check out clinicallypress.com/throw-a-lifeline to make any monetary donation if you're able and willing. We truly appreciate it. 100% of what you put in goes right back into the Throw a Lifeline program. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next episode.